Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Right Guys podcast, and it's MAGA Civil War. And now your hosts, Josh Hammerling and Max McGuire.
Welcome back, Right Guys podcast. My name is Max McGuire, here with Mr. Producer Josh Hammerling, back from a little Christmas break.
Much needed.
Oh,
well,
back from Christmas break.
Back from Christmas break.
And I don't know if we're going to go on Wednesday, because Wednesday is New Year's, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I was thinking about that. We'll see what the audience tells us in the comments,
we'll see
even if they say it.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what our schedules look like. I might be able to go, but my kids are home, so it might be chaos. But so it's a little weird with these couple weeks around Christmas, New Year's. Last week, though, I found myself itching to get on here to do one of these podcasts because the MAGA Civil War was igniting. What the media was calling a MAGA Civil War, and of course, to come on for this, I had to create this thumbnail. It's the only thumbnail you can
Probably your best
possibly.
thumbnail. Probably
It
your
might
best
be.
work.
It might be my best thumbnail.
When
MAGA
I saw it,
Civil War.
I genuinely. So my biggest question was: is Donald Trump more of a Captain America or an Iron Man? Looks like you've already settled the discussion.
Elon Musk is the tech billionaire. He has to be. The Iron
Okay.
Man.
Yeah.
Yes,
All right.
Iron
No,
Man.
I'll accept that. I'll accept that.
And
Wow.
Donald Trump is the Captain America. I think that there's definitely the media overblowing this, wanting to find fractures to take advantage of. But at the same time, I think there are real divisions that this fight, this debate, this argument over, of all things, H-1B visas, it's kind of illustrated that there are real differences between the MAGA loyalists and the, I guess you say, the GOP tech bros.
Yeah.
And so Elon Musk has said very plainly that he used to be a liberal and that the Democrats drove him away, right? It's very obvious that he hasn't abandoned all of those previous thinkings because H-1B visas are completely against MAGA. I mean, this is what Donald Trump said in 2016. I'll read it. This was a comment on, well, I guess we can play the clip. Let's play the clip first. This was at a debate where Donald Trump gave an answer on H-1Bs.
H-1B very well, and it's something that I frankly use, and I shouldn't be allowed to use. We shouldn't have it. Very, very bad for workers. And second of all, I think it's very important to say, well, I'm a businessman, and I have to do what I have to do, and it's sitting there waiting for you, but it's very bad. It's very bad for business in terms of, it's very bad for our workers, and it's unfair for our workers, and we should end it.
Wow.
So that was a shocking, I mean, that's an honesty from, that was what Trump did wonderfully in 2016. It was kind of this brutal honesty, this uncomfortable honesty of like, yeah, I take advantage of the tax code. If you want me to pay more taxes, change it, right? I mean, that was quintessential 2016 Trump. Yeah, I use H-1B. If you don't want me to use H-1B, change it. And we should change it because it's bad for workers. And after that debate performance, his campaign released this statement. Megyn Kelly asked about highly skilled immigration. The H-1B program is neither high-skilled nor immigration. These are temporary foreign workers imported from abroad for the explicit purpose of substituting for American workers at lower pay. I remain totally committed to eliminating rampant, widespread H-1B abuse and ending outrageous practices such as those that occurred at Disney in Florida when Americans were forced to train their foreign replacements. I will end forever the use of H-1B as a cheap labor program and institute an absolute requirement to hire American workers first for every visa and immigration program, no exceptions.
He's always been an America first, right? America first.
Yes, America's first. Remember, it was build American, hire American. That was his first term motto, right? Over the past week, we've seen pressure from Vivek Ramaswamy. I mean, did you see what Vivek said about culture?
Yeah, it was a little bit of a bizarre answer out of him, and I didn't know how to take it, man. It makes me wonder if there's even an argument going on between the two because of their two positions. He seems to be very pro the H-1B visas.
Here we go.
And even Musk for some degree, right?
This came out from Vivek Ramaswamy the day after Christmas. So this was a fight, like, of all things to be talking about on Christmas. How many foreigners to bring into the country? I mean, that's the opposite of what we're talking about. That's not what this election was about. Vivek Ramaswamy, quote, the reason top tech companies often hire foreign-born and first-generation engineers over Native Americans isn't because of an innate American IQ deficiency, a lazy and wrong explanation. A key part of it comes down to the C word, culture. Tough questions demand tough answers, and if we're really serious about fixing the problem, we have to confront the truth. Our American culture has venerated mediocrity over excellence for way too long, at least since the 90s and likely longer. That doesn't start in college, it starts young. A culture that celebrates the prom queen over the math Olympiad champ or the jock over the valedictorian will not produce the best engineers.
You know,
this doesn't sound like America first.
No. And it's kind of a low blow to some degree. I mean, he's blaming the American people, but is he wrong though? How many PhDs does China put out?
He's absolutely wrong. He's absolutely wrong.
We don't put out the number of PhDs the others do.
Obviously, he's never seen High School Musical because you can be a jock and be in the musical at the same time. Thank you very much. Zac Efron did it. You ever heard of him?
Once or twice.
This is a very oversimplified way of saying it. And this was a response to something he was saying earlier in the week, talking about how great India is. The United States average IQ is like a hair below 100. Alabama's average IQ is like, I want to say it's like 97. The average IQ in India is like 1 or 2 points above mental retardation. Just got to be completely clear about this.
If there's a billion of them, Max.
I know, that's the point, though. If you have an IQ below like 70, 75, you're considered mentally retarded, or whatever the politically correct word is for it now.
Developmentally disabled.
Yeah. Slow, or as Southerners would say, simple, right? Whatever word you want to describe it. India, as an average, is just a hair above simple. Now, as you mentioned, they have 1 billion people. Yeah. So they have a lot of people above the average.
Sure. Broad spectrum.
But in terms of just averages, though, it's not even close. So the idea that we need to bring Indian workers into the United States because they're just smarter than Americans, the average IQ in India is 20 some odd points below Alabama. And that's not a diss on Alabama, but Alabama is like the stereotype that you look for if you want to find uneducated. Right, that's the stupid stereotype.
It's a really ethnocentric point that he's making, right? Because he's coming from the position that all Indians are super smart. But the big definer in all this is that it does come down to culture. Because I know lots of Indians that will take several H-1B jobs and they do something on the side, or they'll get hired in India and do the job remotely and take on 3 or 4 of those tech jobs, right? And that's the big difference, is they're willing to take less money for the job. So what business wouldn't hire them? It just, you see all the big names do that, right? So the H-1B visa essentially legalizes the robbing of the American worker? I mean, are they stealing from the American worker with these H-1Bs? Because that's the way I'm kind of seeing it, right? They've got this person out there who's willing to do the job for pennies versus an American who, pays the local taxes for the roads those businesses came in on and vote for all those laws. And I mean, it's like one of the biggest thefts I've ever seen. But on the other side, do we have enough PhDs and people to fill those jobs? My guess is yes.
We do.
My guess is yes.
We could. Here's the thing. H-1B isn't like this old program that we've had forever. It's from the 90s. So we've been hearing the same claim since the 90s. Oh, we don't have Americans to do that job. Well, that's a load of crap. There are tons of Americans getting STEM degrees nowadays, more so than in the 1990s. It doesn't work that way. You don't get to say for 3 decades, oh, there just aren't Americans for that. as there's been a noticeable shift towards more Americans getting those degrees. And before we get off of the culture bit,
Yeah.
it would be remiss if I didn't mention, I don't want to rag on India, but India, they get a huge chunk of the H-1Bs. If you look at all of the people on planet Earth who don't use a toilet and just shit in the wide open, 60% of the open defecators, is what they're called. We just shit on the side of the road. We just shit in the fields. 60% of the world's open defecators live in India. So as long as we're talking about culture, like this is where, like, I get it. He has tons of pride for where he comes from, and he has tons of pride for where he's an American, where he is now. I get that. I totally get that. Where his family comes from. But to say that, like, oh man, America has a culture problem, and you're putting India on a pedestal, and India has 60% of the world's open shitters who don't even use toilets. I mean, like, come on, like,
Wow.
what are we talking about here? What are we talking about here?
And let's not forget that they still kind of live under a caste system, even though they have eliminated the caste system. They have no problem putting people in groups. Yeah, I mean, it's ethnocentric, right? Everybody plays the card at times. He just thinks, Indians are superior when it comes to the STEM. But I know lots of kids nowadays that have graduated with STEM degrees and have moved on to become successful engineers in American, like, military places, right? That's all I can say is that they're out there. They're ready for those jobs. And imagine applying for that job thinking you might get the salary and somebody undercuts you by 20 grand a year for the same position. I mean, it cheapens the American worker, the educated American worker, the technically skilled educated American worker, right? I mean, they're checking all the right boxes.
All H-1B salaries are searchable. There's a database online. You can look at all of them.
Really?
All regulated, all searchable. Here are the employers who used H-1B to bring cooks into the country. People who could cook in their restaurants.
Really?
Yeah. You're saying that there was no one who knew how to cook in Key West, Florida? No, there were. But chances are there's no one willing to cook in Key West, Florida for an annual salary of less than 40 grand a year.
Yeah.
Like, no, you're not going to find a below minimum wage cook in Key West where everything is expensive, where lodging's expensive, where food's expensive, right? Of course there are cooks in Miami, Florida. There's tons of them. There's tons of cooking schools and culinary schools. There probably aren't a lot of people who go to culinary school and say, yeah, I want this job for 34 grand.
No, they want to go earn the maximum amount they can, right? It's if you've got the skills, throw down on beautiful food and get paid for it, right? Get paid for this skill.
Yeah.
And so who do we? There's like this big blame game going on because of this, right? Where's the blame lie? Does it lie with the people that create the H-1B visa? Does it lie with the businesses that hire with the H-1B visas? I mean, is the blame on the people who accept the jobs on the H-1B visas?
No, I don't critique anyone who looks at the system and says, I can use it to my advantage, right? If I lived abroad and there was a program for me to come over here, I would take advantage of it 100%.
Sure.
I blame our politicians who have allowed this to stay in place. They allowed this to stay in place because of what we just witnessed. Donald Trump going from being against H-1B visa to suddenly now in favor of it, while also saying he wants to cut down on the fraud and the abuse of it. Why? Because Elon Musk likes it. Elon Musk likes H-1B visas because his companies use them a lot. Here's Tesla. Tesla's H-1B salaries. No one actually believes that there isn't an American who could be a materials planner.
Yeah.
Of course they could be. There are tons of engineering programs, engineers who would love to go work for Tesla. Right? Mm-hmm. Love it. There are not a lot of engineers who want to pay 50, 60, 70 grand a year for college, come out of 4 years of college, $250,000 in debt, to then take on a $78,000 engineering job. Right? They're expecting a little bit more than that.
Sure.
Now, that $78,000 is incredibly appealing to an Indian engineer who on average can get an Indian bachelor's degree in engineering for less than $13,000.
Wow.
So if you're an if you're in India and you just got the equivalent of 13 grand for a bachelor's degree, and you say, "Oh wow, they're gonna pay me 78 grand to move to Texas,"
Right.
I'll do that in a heartbeat. Because not only you're going to get more money, you're going to pay back your degree in a year. Pay back your degree in a year.
Yeah,
and you're going to get a visa and be allowed to move to the United States.
And talk about having a complete immediate raise in your standard of living, running water. I mean, plumbing in some cases, electricity that has codes.
No open defecation.
Open defecation,
well,
right? Who wouldn't want to take it?
There might be a little bit of open defecation in certain parts of Austin. But you can avoid that if you just don't go down those roads. But so,
insane.
like, you understand why someone in India would look at this as a gold mine. And you could understand why Tesla would want this, right? Oh, you're telling me I can take $100,000+ job and I can save 20% in salary
On 40 positions? Could you imagine the savings?
I mean, we can see all the savings. All around this much, all sub 90 grand. So these aren't like the genius people. This is an associate engineer, entry level. These are entry level programs. An American would want this to be a little bit more. A lot of these jobs, worst kept secret, is a lot of these jobs don't actually get put out for Americans to apply to.
No.
That's the biggest fraud of H-1B. H-1B is supposed to be, I tried to hire American, I couldn't. We just don't have the workers who are knowledgeable in this. I need to hire someone outside the country. But a lot of these jobs don't get put out to Americans.
Talk about fraud.
Yeah.
It feels like fraud because if the job was never posted for Americans to get, and then you then use the H-1B visa to just pad your pocketbooks, how is that not fraud against the American people? And I've become an Elon guy, but he has rules. He played by them. There's no one to punish, or there's no problem with using this system. So, is it just going to continue? What's going to happen here?
Here's the thing. He's taking advantage, like Trump said in 2016, he's taking advantage of a system that is in place. And we've allowed this system to go on for over 3 decades, right? Shame on us for allowing it. In 2016, Donald Trump mentioned the case of Disney, where they actually laid off an entire group of workers after having them train their own H-1B replacements. How can you say you need H-1B because there's no Americans to do the job when the H-1Bs were used to replace Americans? Mm-hmm. And Disney's not the only one who did it. There were a lot of different tech companies, a lot of energy companies that did this in 2016, 2017, because H-1Bs are willing to work for less. If you take someone out of Mumbai or New Delhi and say, congratulations, you not only get to live in the United States with a pathway to a green card, but you also get a job that will pay you more in 1 year than you'd be able to make in 10 in India. Congratulations. Of course, they're going to take advantage of that. They're not going to sit there and say, actually, I think this is a $120,000 job. No, they're going to say, thank you for the opportunity. I'm happy to work for that amount. Mm-hmm. Because the visa itself is also valuable, right? So you could probably pay these people 50 grand. And they'd say, yeah, I'll take it. Because they value the visa that highly. If you told them, hey, you can buy a visa for 50 grand, they do it. They'd absolutely do it. And I don't blame them for wanting to do that. The other part of it is, though, if you're an H-1B worker and you get fired, life becomes incredibly complicated for you. And you all of a sudden get taken from the pathway to citizenship to a path for deportation. So the workers who are H-1B workers are willing to work 60 hours a week, 80 hours a week, 100 hours a week. Every work holidays, right? They'll work night, day. They will work as hard as anyone will work, because the alternative is if they get fired or they get laid off, they're back to India. They're back to the world of open defecation.
Man, talk about having an army of just people that do anything you say for less money.
It's leverage. It's leverage over them.
Yeah.
Right? It's a tremendous amount of leverage. So an American wouldn't have that kind of leverage, right? Not only would you have to pay an American more to do the job, But if an American were to be fired or let go, they take everything they learned at Tesla, for example, and go on over to Ford. Yeah. Right? You don't have to worry about that with foreign workers. They're not going to get a job at Ford. They're going to get put on the next plane back to India. Mm-hmm. So there's so many reasons why it's more beneficial for a company to use H-1Bs than hire Americans, and it gets to the point where it's unfair to the labor market. It's unfair to the American workers.
Who started the H-1B?
It was in the 90s.
I remember when that thing came out too, and it was touted as being something that was going to help America, right? It was going to make sure that if we had deficits in any of our technical sector, that people would be able to come in and fill those gaps because it was going to help. But it sounds like it got bastardized somewhere along the line in those 30 years, maybe even the first couple of years.
Yeah.
Right? Yes. And it's befuddling now. I mean, it's super befuddling that it's been allowed to go on. And the dirty secret about the H-1B visa is that everyone likes it. At least if you're a company.
If you're a company, everyone likes it. Everyone likes it. But it's to the point now where they're not using H-1Bs just to fill holes here and there. They're using H-1Bs to staff out entire teams. Where you go to one of these companies, I'm not sure if it's this necessarily Tesla, but you go to some of these tech companies and every person on this certain engineering team is H-1B.
Wow.
Which is ridiculous. It's crazy, right? But the H-1B isn't even the only one, right? There are lots of other visas that people can use to get into the country to do a job, right? Melania Trump infamously came in under what was called the Einstein visa. That's supposed to be for like PhDs and stuff, but it's also people who have tremendous expertise. Came in as a model, right? She had modeling expertise. That's not something you can just
7 languages on top of that. But she could translate.
But that makes sense, right? You're a world-renowned model. You can't just go to the model school in the United States and find someone who can do exactly what she could do. That's one. The other really bad one, in my opinion, is J1. J1 visas are supposed to be for cultural enrichment. They're exchange student visas.
Oh.
What's happened, and I talk about this in my book, The Conservative's Guide to Winning Every Immigration Argument.
Cha-ching!
Cha-ching, yeah. I talk about it. J1 visas have become the crutch that the tourism industry uses to staff up. If you go to the Jersey Shore, as an example, and you go to one of those towns that has a boardwalk, maybe you walk into a pizza place, you walk into a fudge shop or a saltwater taffy shop, you will be greeted by someone at the counter with an Eastern European accent. And it'll shock you. But so many of those businesses, quote unquote, rely on J1 visas to staff out. Now, J1 visa is supposed to be for cultural exchange. And as such, they're really not supposed to make a lot of money because they're here to learn. So right off the bat, you start to be able to pay these people like not even like a wage. It's almost like an allowance. Because what ends up happening is you bundle it together and you give them room and board. So let's say you have a saltwater taffy shop and you put an apartment up top, apartment on the second floor. Finish it out. Oh, well, all of a sudden your labor now costs next to nothing because you're paying for their room and board. When I was in college, I went to bartending school. I was like, I'll go work at the Jersey Shore. I'll be a bartender. I worked a little bit as a bar back and as a bouncer, but never could get that bartending job. And I remember I applied for one bar on the Jersey Shore, and I didn't get the job. I said, hey, you know what? It's a hard job to get. There's so many people applying. Everyone wants this job. Later in the summer, I went back to the restaurant, and they had J1 visa holders tending bar as cultural exchange because they had a apartment. It was either upstairs or it was like next door where they were able to pay them by giving them room, feeding them out of the kitchen. That was their board, right? And they worked basically for free. Made a little bit of money. But it kind of reminds you of like the old Americana of the company store, right? That old song, 15 tons, what do you get?
Yeah.
Another day older and a deeper in debt. St. Peter, won't you call me, because I can't go. I owe my soul to the company store. The way they did it is they didn't pay you in money. They paid you in tokens, and those tokens could only be redeemed at the company store. Everything was inflated. You could never get out from under it, and that got banned, right? What got left on the cutting room floor is like, oh, maybe we also shouldn't do this to foreigners. So you have companies now, businesses, hiring these J-1 visa holders for an entire summer to do jobs for pennies on the dollar. And it's almost like a slave. It's a little bit like slave labor. I mean, there are entire summer camps that are entirely staffed with J-1 cultural exchange workers, and they barely have to pay them because they're giving them room and board at the summer camp.
Which is kind of shocking. I just started kind of searching who created the H-1B visas and all that. And what I did end up running into is that apparently DHS kind of oversees the visa program. So Mayorkas is in charge of making things happen. And just on December 17th, apparently they announced a final rule that will significantly enhance U.S. companies' ability to fill job vacancies in critical fields, strengthening our economy with these visas. So is that why this is hitting the forefront? I mean, where is it sitting now? If it was slave labor before they strengthened the rules, what is it going to look like now? What's it going to look like next year? I mean, this is beyond shocking. I mean, and this is at a time when Americans really do need good-paying jobs.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, the summer camp counselor isn't the good-paying job.
No.
But there are a ton of high school kids who would do that job.
Yeah.
But the summer camp would have to pay them more. Because they're local, you can't get away with paying them by room and board. Oh, no. you're gonna spend half of my salary on room and board. I'll just live at home and I'll come in every day for work, right? Wow. So that's how they get away with it. But this is all up and down the economy. H-1B, J-1, those are just a couple of the types of visas. There are so many different loopholes you can take advantage of. And if you want to have a country which is build American, hire American, H-1B can't be the tip of the spear. It just can't.
No.
It just can't. And I understand why Elon Musk wants H-1B. I don't blame him. If you could take a 25%, 30% reduction on salary to hire a foreign worker who will work day and night 24 hours a day for you, yeah, I could understand why you'd want to take that. The problem is, you also get Elon Musk posts like this. This is from 12/27. The reason I'm in America, along with so many critical people who built SpaceX, Tesla, and hundreds of other companies that made America strong, is because of H-1B. Take a big step back and F yourself in the face. I will go to war on this issue, the likes of which you cannot possibly comprehend.
Okay.
This is where it becomes really uncomfortable. Because the idea that the richest man in the world can influence policy like this, which is explicitly against MAGA. Again, I showed it from 2016.
Yeah.
That is not Donald Trump's policy. That is not the policy he ran on in 2016. It is not the policy he ran on in 2020. It is not the policy he ran on in 2024. It is not.
Wow.
Elon Musk has an oversized influence, though, because he helped get Donald Trump elected. So it's a very uncomfortable. This is why it is almost like a MAGA Civil War. Not to be overly dramatic, but what other issues are going to come up like this? Like, if this is how it's going to go, and Elon Musk can say, oh, you know that build American, hire American? Let's ditch the last part. If Elon Musk can do that, then we actually have a problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because then what else can we, what else is going to get changed?
It's really shocking he would make such a statement with vulgarities. I mean, that's kind of
fairness,
pretty wild.
He's quoting Tropic Thunder.
Oh. Yeah, there was that part of it.
That he's quoting Tropic Thunder. So it's not just out of the blue. There's a scene in Tropic Thunder where
I'm familiar with it.
Tom Cruise is negotiating with the Flaming Dragon terrorists, and instead of paying the ransom, he tells them to go F themselves in the face. That's what he's quoting. So he's trying to be cute. He's trying to be funny. But when the movement has been fighting to get rid of H-1B visas because they've been so abused to actually replace Americans, the joke doesn't hit.
No, it almost feels like a betrayal, really. I mean, it shows you America first, but my company before America first.
Yeah.
And that's sort of his position he's taking on it. I've had several people say, be careful of Elon Musk. He's in it for himself. He'll wear whatever clothes it takes at the time to make sure he becomes profitable. And I don't know if this is going to be, if this is systemic, right? Is this going to continue? Is this going to spread? I mean, is this the position a lot of these businesses are going to take? And if so, they donate a lot of money to campaigns.
They do.
And then that's where the pressure starts to work up. Because, he, like you said in prior podcasts, he has enough money to go out and start making influential changes. He has Soros-type money to go make changes, right?
Soros is worth like 10 billion, 20 billion.
Right.
He has 10x that, right? 20x. So he's a great ally to have when you align. When you don't align, it's terrifying. It's terrifying. Yeah. I mean, because for years, for decades, we've been told we need illegal immigrants to do the jobs Americans don't want to do.
Yeah.
The low-paying jobs. Now what they're saying is we need H-1B workers to do the high-paying jobs.
Nobody wants to do.
Nobody wants the six-figure job at Tesla, really?
Yeah, I take it a heartbeat, right?
No one
wouldn't.
Like all the engineering programs across the country, no one wants that, really. Right. So then what's left? If the illegal aliens are doing all the low-paying jobs, and the foreign workers are getting the high-paying jobs, we're just stuck in that middle area, right?
Well, where does that leave Americans? I mean, that would mean the middle class. I imagine all those people who would now be stuck in the middle class because they can't get the high-paying jobs because they've been replaced, right? And they can't get the low-paying jobs because they've been replaced. So where does the Americans start to fall? What jobs start to exist out there?
Yeah.
I mean, you got to go into business for yourself, most likely, but man, that's totally not an America First move or policy.
If we can't get rid of H-1B. You're saying, it's just too ingrained in American business. It's just too important. You can't just pull the plug like that. Then I think H-1B needs to be redesigned to eventually eliminate itself. The minute that a job is identified as there not being enough Americans to fill it, that's a problem. It's not a problem that should be allowed to exist for 30 plus years. I say, we don't have enough engineers. Okay. For 30 years, just going to hire foreigners? So here's my idea. H-1B visas should not be a savings. To go through that process and hire a foreign worker, it should cost companies more than if they were to hire Americans. So there should be, in my opinion, a 25 to 30% payroll tax applied to every H-1B worker's salaries. If it has to go up there, fine. That money then gets earmarked towards educational training programs designed to train an American to do the precise job that company claims they can't fill.
I like it. I'd be on board, but this is part of the debate of it. Like the one thing is that nobody's talking about it. It's like either accept H-1B visas or don't.
Yeah. But do you know how what would happen with that? Like we're looking at those, where is it? Right here. Right. So let's make it really easy and make it a 25% for this industrial engineer from Tesla in Houston, Texas. Right. A 25% tax would take that $80,000 salary and basically bring it up to $100,000. Mm-hmm. If you were to do that for 4 years, you would train one American to do that job in a Texas in-state tuition, right? You could get an engineering degree in just a couple years of paying that one H-1B worker. So for every 4 years you've paid an H-1B worker, you would have trained a replacement. We should be having Americans replace H-1B workers, not the other way around.
Yeah.
Right? And if we had this program in the 90s, there wouldn't be an H-1B program right now.
No.
Because the minute you identify a job that you don't have anyone to fill, within 10 years, there'd be Americans to fill it.
And there wouldn't be a problem. And I don't think there is a problem. And it's all built on the idea that there's a problem. Is there a problem, though? The only problem is with profits.
Yeah.
The only problem is padding the wallet on the way out. It feels almost greedy inside of that statement. And that's where I was going at with Musk's tweet. It almost feels greedy. And if you don't like it, I'm going to make it happen. It sounds like he's negotiating in ultimatums, and that's not a negotiation, right?
Yeah.
And he's going to start getting pushback. I mean, yeah, he can do a lot, but man, if the full weight of people really come down on this and it starts changing, he'll have no choice but to change it. Talk about a fight.
The struggle is that Donald Trump's a lame duck. So the prospect of I need to keep the American people happy, otherwise I won't win re-election, that's gone, right?
Yeah.
We haven't had a situation like this in well over 100 years, 150 years, of a president having his second term non-sequentially.
Sequential.
Right? This feels like it's a first term. It's a second term. So we haven't really had that situation of someone coming into office and not really be... Now, he obviously wants to keep a Republican House, a Republican Senate, so there's that incentive, obviously. But this whole H-1B situation of the American people really don't want H-1Bs, well, guess what? They could pick any other Republican, they're still going to be H-1Bs. Yeah. And if they vote for Democrats, they're still going to be H-1Bs. So, like, there isn't a good leverage. There isn't good leverage on Trump to force him to do it, other than you promised to do this, Trump, do it. Now, I think he cares enough about his legacy, about what people think of him, that if he was to stray too far from the MAGA path, if he was to stray too far, I think that he wouldn't like the pushback he'd be getting from conservative media, right? Steve Bannon would have a field day if he just completely abandoned MAGA. It would be the end of Trump, right? So Donald Trump obviously doesn't want that. But it's up to all of us to keep feet to the fire, right? To make sure that, one, he sticks to this promise with H-1B. If we're going to have an H-1B, can't be abused, and it has to be designed to eliminate itself. It has to. Right? We have tariffs to protect American industries. Why don't we have tariffs to protect American workers? That's what we need.
Yeah, well, it's never been about Americans. And that's been the biggest problem in the last 30 years, is that it's never really been about America, which befuddles me, right? We're the ones that make this country happen, but it's never been about us. It's just, keep the corporate machine going, keep America's tax money flowing. And there's nobody in Congress right now that feels like their political life hinges on H-1B visas. So why would they even make a move with it?
Well,
there's no fear.
There are a lot of companies that have built their profitability on the back of jobs being held by H-1B visas. You tell that same company you need to boost your engineering costs or whatever, this team, you have to spend 20% more for those jobs, all of a sudden they might not be profitable anymore. Mm-hmm. Right? Which, I mean, bigger companies, not the case, but smaller tech startups, it's entirely possible. I don't know. I've been around companies that have used H-1B, and I've never felt comfortable with it.
It just feels like abuse. It's just another thing abusing the American citizen. I mean, if you got elected because it's America first, and you start doing things that aren't America first, it's just going to be a whole new mess. There will be no continuation of MAGA. Right? Like you've said, this is a Trump win, not a Republican win. I have no idea who's going to take up the mantle in 4 years. So unless this stuff gets hashed out now and we find that next person, that next group, that next individual to start keeping MAGA alive, we're in for maybe 4
Yeah.
to 8 years of a new Democrat president, right? And then what is that going to look like? Oh, there's too much, man. There's so much that has to be done in these next 4 years, and they've got to get started the moment they walk into the White House. Which the whole, not having Speaker Johnson in there to get him replaced and not have a speaker.
He's not going
right
to
before.
He's not going to replace.
I hope not. I mean, it'd be a
gotta-
hell of a plan.
You gotta go to war with the army you have. You don't.
Not the one you want. Yeah.
Not the one you want. You gotta go. So at this point, if they don't go with Speaker Johnson, Trump's first 100 days, which are traditionally the easiest time for a president to get their agenda done, 100 days are over, right? I don't think he's going to get a honeymoon the way most presidents get because the media hates him. But still, your first 100 days are when you're most likely to get things done. As it is, the Senate's going to be kind of hung up on confirmations. You got to have the House doing this work, passing these bills, sending them over to the Senate, putting pressure on Democrats in the Senate to hop on board on issues that we can both agree with, at least a little bit, right? If the House is paralyzed, we just saw what happened with McCarthy.
Yeah.
How long was that? That was weeks, right?
I thought it was 16 weeks, or was it more than that? They went forever, and we were talking. We were on the air at the time saying this is just delaying anything that can get done. And is masterful manipulation of the political system.
21 days. That's
felt like
for
weeks.
21 days.
Weeks. Felt like weeks.
It was 3 weeks. 21 days, 21 hours. The House was without a speaker. So if that was to happen again, right? Donald Trump's 100 days turn into 80 days. You can't have it. So you got to go to war with the army you have. You got to put pressure on Johnson to hold true. I don't like what he was doing with the Democrats. He's out with Donald Trump at UFC, going to the Army-Navy game, basically photobombing every picture he could, while at the same time negotiating with Democrats on a deal that was explicitly not MAGA. So that's got to get changed. They've got to put his feet to the fire. But it's to the point where you got to go to war with the army you have, and you can't have a speaker fight in the first 100 days. You just can't.
No.
But the other thing we need to really focus on is there's got to be some clawback, because what Biden is doing in this last month,
oh my gosh,
is unconscionable. Just today, the U.S. announced $5.9 billion with a B more aid to Ukraine in terms of military hardware and just cash. We're basically propping up Ukraine's budget. I think there was 2.5 billion in security, 3.4 billion in just cash to help them balance their budget. So we won't balance our budget.
What the?
But we're balancing their budget.
And Max, I'm still waiting for all the people in Hawaii to get help. I'm still waiting for everybody in the South after the hurricane to get help. And there was no money. The best we can do is $400, and you can't log into the system. But we found $5.9 billion in cash.
Well, not all cash. Ukraine. Some of it's.
But still, all right.
But we have to repurchase it. Right? So maybe in the first days of the invasion of Ukraine, it made sense. Hey, here's some old bullets we have. We're not going to fire them anymore. We're kind of just leaving them just in case. You take them. Here's old artillery shells from the 80s. We prefer not to use them, but you need them. Take them. That time is over. Yeah. The old stock has been depleted.
Right.
Everything we're sending Ukraine now is new stuff we've already built explicitly to give it away, or our new stuff. So everything we give them, we have to repurchase. So we might as well just be giving them cash. But the budget aid is actually really despicable, because
what does that even mean?
Yeah. I'll tell you what it means. In Ukraine, in their budget, they have welfare programs for people who are out of work as a result of the war.
Oh.
So if a rocket hits your store, you don't go bankrupt. They prop you up. They pay the rent for you. They'll make everything work, right? So that's some of what we're helping pay for. But where was that in Western North Carolina?
Yeah.
Right? When the hurricanes came through, destroyed businesses, you don't see the government saying, "Oh, don't worry, we're going to keep you whole."
Not at all.
There were people in Western North Carolina who were kicked out on Christmas Eve of their accommodations.
Yeah.
They were in hotel rooms paid for by FEMA, and FEMA demanded that they get out on December 23rd and December 24th. Couldn't even let them stay through Christmas. Said, nope, you're out. Your voucher ran out. The vouchers don't run out in Ukraine. And I have complete sympathy to people who are in a war-torn country. Complete sympathy. But the idea that we have Americans who are in similar circumstances, not from man-made disasters, but natural disasters, getting nothing. Getting nothing. Meanwhile, the president can, with the stroke of a pen, by executive fiat, just give the cash away. But if you say, hey, why didn't you do that in North Carolina? Say, oh, the law doesn't allow me to do that.
Right.
It's shameful.
It's disgusting. And he announces it, and he's proud about it. That's the thing, is that how proud they are of it. We've abandoned America a long time ago. And the other thing is the money we're giving away, those are just tax dollars that are going to have to be taxed to us in the future. I mean, it's the problem with all this aid. We have to pay the bill. We're already in a $20 trillion deficit. We have to pay that back plus this. We have to replenish our arms plus the debt. Right? And these people who are in these areas that have been affected by the natural disasters are still paying their taxes, those same tax dollars which go to Ukraine, and they don't come back to them, right? I don't understand why people have not marched on Washington over this. How many billions have we given to Ukraine now? $500 billion?
Yeah.
It's got to be more, right? I think it's right around there. But it might be so big that we don't even know. That's the money that they announce. I don't know if there's black budget CIA cash drop-offs. You know, they've never done that in South America. They've never done that in the Caribbean, right? This is just the stuff we know about.
Here's the other bit that I hate these stupid ads. Here's the other bit that the budgetary stuff is going towards. It's going to fix Ukraine's infrastructure that Russia keeps destroying. Which again, I have the utmost sympathy for anyone struggling to keep the lights on when Russian rockets keep blowing up the power substations, or to get clean drinking water when the Russians keep bombing the water sanitation plant. I have sympathy for that. But I also have sympathy for the people in Hawaii who still haven't gotten in to see their properties, still can't rebuild, right? Or the people, again, in Western North Carolina, where they have limited access to power, limited access to broadband, limited access to water. They don't have limited access to even roads. I mean, I was just watching Heartbreaking. They had some severe weather last couple weeks, and some of the temporary bridges that they built just to get across rivers and stuff washed away. So they have to build them again. No, they were temporary bridges. They're not supposed to last forever, but we're off giving billions of dollars to Ukraine for their infrastructure when we have Americans struggling to get out of their towns.
I know. It's disgusting. And didn't the Amish build a bunch of homes that they kicked a bunch of people out because they didn't meet code on top of it? Code. I mean, that wouldn't stop anybody from Ukraine from living in it. The FEMA's a disaster. We're giving away our nation's treasure to a war that can never probably be won. And it's not, it doesn't end. They're blowing up all the stuff they fix over and over. It will be an endless supply of money has to be sent to Ukraine, according to the Biden administration. And it can't last forever. Because what happens next year when we're $30 trillion in debt? What happens when we reach $100 trillion in debt? We're going to declare bankruptcy? It doesn't work like that with countries.
Yeah. Luis on Rumble saying she's a little behind on the stream. New engineer with a Bachelor of Science engineering will be hired at 80 to 90K at the Department of Defense, depending on where you're located, for example, NUPO. Yes, I mean, a lot of times they'll come in, there's the general schedule, so I'm not going to pull that up, but depending on the job is where you'll fall on the schedule. Now, if you have to actually be enlisted, or you have to be an officer, your pay will vary depending on your rank, right? But if you're going to come in as like a civilian worker engineer, a lot of times you'll come in at like a GS 12, which is a little under what you put. It's like 75K, but that can change based on, like you said, where you're at. The struggle, I mean, that's true. It's absolutely true. So that kind of calls into question, because the Pentagon's not hiring foreign Indian labor to be engineers in the Defense Department. If there are Americans who can do those jobs at those levels, why do you need to then bring foreign workers in to do a similar job at a similar pay rate? It creates more questions than answers. But yes, entry-level government positions are going to be a little less than what you'd find in the private sector. But you're going to get benefits. You're going to have more longevity and more job security, I guess, in terms of government salaries. You're absolutely right.
It just feels like theft, man. It just feels like theft of the American people. They keep stealing our money. They're taking our very souls away from the country.
Yeah.
I mean, America is just getting, it's what's that old saying from the Lord of the Rings? I felt like too little butter stretched over too much bread, right? I mean, eventually it gets so thin, it's like it's not even there anymore.
Yeah.
And that's where we're at.
It's every time we talk about immigration, there's always the GOP and the Democrats who want everyone to believe that this has nothing to do with Americans, that this won't harm Americans. But that's not true. We have a housing crisis in this country. Mm-hmm. I was looking at data that came out last couple of days. Homelessness in the United States jumped, I think it was 18%.
Really?
Yeah.
Holy crap.
Homelessness. Now, a lot of that is addiction. A lot of that is mental health issues. But a lot of that is also people living out of their car or living in shelter just because they can't afford a house. While at the same time, we have entire hotels being bought out by New York City to give housing to illegal aliens who then proceed to go and light people on fire at the subway. You see that there was another person lit on fire at Penn Station this past week? Yeah.
No.
Another person lit on fire.
Second?
Don't know who did it, but another one, maybe a copycat, who knows. And every time they find these criminals, I go, where are they staying? Oh, they're staying at the migrant shelter. There was I believe it was a DHS worker stabbed to death.
You're kidding. Oh my God. Where's the national news on this? Like, it just gets ignored? I mean, that gets pushed under the rug? Man, it's like the media is complicit in the lies.
Yeah, so a Brooklyn homeless shelter, which are holding a lot of these people, a homeless aid worker was stabbed to death. To death. It was a migrant shelter. So if you say you have a homelessness problem, which apparently it increased 18% in the last year, look at the border. Everyone who crosses the border has to live somewhere. Mm-hmm. You have cities subsidizing housing. In Chicago, once you apply for it, you can actually get, we covered this on the show, a couple grand a month to furnish and rent an apartment. I think it's for 6 months. That's more than many Americans get.
Yeah.
That's more than many Americans get. So, and even if it isn't subsidized, these new illegal aliens working under the table, paying for rent somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's a house, that's an apartment that could have gone to an American citizen.
Mm-hmm.
So the housing crisis disappears if the illegal immigration crisis disappears.
Man, you think there's some causation there?
Yeah, we have millions of illegal aliens in the country living in apartments, houses, hotel rooms, homeless shelters, whatever it is, that the minute they're gone, that housing becomes available to an American or a legal resident.
Yeah. And if, typically if there's, think about all the demand for those spaces. And when there's high demand, there's usually high prices.
Yeah.
So as these people show up, the rent starts to soar on top of it. I mean, it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. We see it everywhere we go. Drive around California, drive around Colorado. Look at your local sanctuary city.
Yeah.
Right? I see nothing but veterans homeless on the streets.
Yeah. In cities, not just New York, also in Ohio, you have these illegal alien migrants working for Uber Eats, Lyft, DoorDash. I mean, we covered this on the show, a story out of New York of illegal aliens basically illegally working through DoorDash and food delivery by finding an American, paying to use their app, right? And then they're delivering food on e-bikes that they rent by the hour, right? So they're willing to work for less. So then when they look at their app and there's an offer, hey, do you want to deliver for this much. The Americans are saying that's not enough. That doesn't cover gas. It doesn't cover tolls, right? It doesn't cover any of that. The illegal alien looks at it and says, oh yeah, I'll do it for that. So the way these apps work is if people don't accept the delivery, then the company has to up the price that they're willing to pay to get the food delivered. So if they say, hey, this guy just ordered McDonald's, needs to go 2 miles, you'll get paid $4 to do it. Americans say, oh, $4 is not enough. And they know that it's not really enough for anyone. Mm-hmm. So they know if I hold out, eventually they'll say $5. Eventually the app will say $6 because that food still needs to get delivered, right?
Right, yeah.
But if the illegal alien swoops in and says, oh, I can rent a city bike for $2, you're telling me I can make $2? Yeah, I'll do it.
Yeah.
And they're off to the races, right? So illegal aliens are undercutting American jobs, right? How much? You look at the price of food; everything's gone up, right? Well, part of that is demand side inflation. As demand for things increases, the price increases. What happens if all of a sudden millions of illegal aliens don't have to buy food? Well, the price of food goes down.
Absolutely. Have you seen how hard it is to get eggs? Because eggs were cheap, and they're easy to cook.
They've come down a little. They've come down a little bit, but they're still up.
Demand's high. Like all the farmers will tell you, demands for eggs it's the highest it's ever been.
Yeah,
and it is used in a lot of cooking from lots of South America.
It's a cheap protein source, right?
Yeah,
if you're a family and you have 5 or 6 kids, for a couple bucks you can give all of your kids some protein to start their day. There isn't any other protein source out there. You can do it for that cheap. So yeah, I mean, we have a lot of problems in this country. And the way you fix these problems is you look at it and say, okay, is this making life harder or better for Americans? And if the answer is it's making it harder for Americans, then it's got to go, right? H-1B is not making life better for Americans. It's making life better for companies, absolutely. It's not making life better for Americans. Illegal immigration is not making life better for Americans. It's got to go, right? It just has to go. Because at every point, it's hurting Americans. I'll tell this last story before we go. I've told it before on this podcast and our old podcast. When my wife used to be a teacher. And when we first moved out to Colorado, she put out job applications to very hard to get into charter schools in the Denver area. Now she's since experienced that and learned that those jobs aren't what they're what they're presumed to be, right? They're a lot harder. There's not as much support. But coming right out of college, an inner city charter school is like a gold medal job to get. When she got in there, one of the earliest friends that she made was a DACA person, quote unquote dreamer, an illegal alien. There were dozens of teachers who went through 4 years of college, get their teaching degree, applying for like 5 or 6, 7 slots. And one of them was held by an illegal alien. That is the dream position coming out of teaching school. One of them was held by an illegal alien. There are now medical school programs that set aside multiple spots each year for illegal aliens. Think about that. There are residencies. I think it's Loyola Chicago that sets aside spots for illegal aliens who go through with DACA, get their medical degree. Imagine being an American, spending all that money on medical school. You apply to a residency, and it goes to an illegal alien. Sorry, you fell one below the cutoff. Sorry, try again next year. Every year, there are Americans who have medical degrees but can't get a job. Wow. Can't get a residency. And we have residency spots going to illegal aliens. If it hurts American citizens, it should be gone.
It's got to go. It's got to go.
I'm sorry if Elon likes it. Likes it. Part of the benefit of being the richest man in the world is you might be able to afford to pay Americans $10,000, $20,000 more a year to do the job.
Yeah, I agree.
That's one of the benefits, I guess. Any final words before we wrap up?
Oh, just be careful, gang. It's the new year is happening. If you're going to go out and party, get a car. Call an Uber. You know, make good decisions on that night. I lost a friend a long time ago on a New Year's, and it's just been my journey ever since to make sure that you don't do anything stupid. So don't drive drunk, King.
Don't drive drunk.
Don't drive drunk.
Don't drive drunk.
Yeah.
My little PSA is going to be look at bullion. Look at the price of gold. Look at the price of silver. These are good things to get. Hold on to. I found 50 ounces of silver that I bought 5 years ago, and it's gone from $21 an ounce to now it's up to close around $30 an ounce.
30.
Yeah. So I'm looking at that. It's like, holy crap! My money just almost went up by 50%.
Dude, I had some from the 90s.
Yeah.
It was like $3 or something stupid, $7.
So,
oh my gosh,
look at that. Look at that. If you haven't ever done it, there are really good places online that can ship some bullion. Don't worry about the collectible stuff. Just get some of the cheapest 1 ounce coins, 5 ounce blocks, and just stack it deep, because never underestimate the ability for the world to get weird.
2025 is going to be amazing, gang.
Yeah.
It's going to be crazy.
Getting crazy. And you'd be surprised at what you can negotiate with.
Yeah.
I went to a flea market over the weekend. I was tempted just to bring an ounce of silver to see if they'd take that instead of cash. I might do that next time.
Yeah.
Just see if I can buy something.
I don't know. Hold on to that commodity, man. I know.
Well,
hold on to that silver.
I'll buy another one. But just like if I know I'm going to spend $30, my kids like comic books and stuff. So if I know I'm going to spend $30 at a flea market, I kind of want to see, like, hey, here you go. Here's silver.
They'll do it.
I bet they take it.
Oh, I bet they do.
Yeah, that is my little advice. But that's it for this edition of the podcast. If you like it, subscribe, give us a thumbs up, give us a follow. We're on YouTube, we're on X, we're on Rumble. So give us a follow, give us a subscribe there. We also have the audio edition of the podcast, which is available everywhere. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, Podbean, Audible. I should probably check to see if there's new places out there. Haven't changed that in a while, so I'll check that to see if there's new places we can go to. But subscribe to the audio podcast, and you can listen. We try and make this as audio-friendly as possible, so you can listen as you go about your day. Not quite sure if we're going to be live New Year's Day. We'll coordinate off-air, and I'll ask my wife. We'll see what's planned. But we will definitely be back on Friday, so make sure you stop by for that. That's it for this edition. My name is Max McGuire.
I'm Josh Hammerling.
Remember that the fight to take back our country is not over yet, but the only way we win is if we all stand up and fight together. See you next time.
Happy New Year.